The reaction wasn't the first thing that happened. It was the first thing you understood. I'm Em, dog mom, former vet tech, dog trainer, and canine nutritionist who has watched the right training fail in the wrong environment and who works with dog parents trying to figure out how to help their dogs be successful in every situation. I had a client whose dog, Seven, had always been fine. Stable home, anxious dog, but nothing that felt unmanageable to the family. And then the holidays happened. Too many people, too much noise, too much going on for too long. And Seven got completely overwhelmed and redirected. It happened once, and my client was devastated because she had no idea it was coming. When we started working together, we found that Seven had been communicating the whole time, stiffening when things got loud, retreating to corners, trying to create space, giving everyone around her information that they didn't understand yet. Seven wasn't reacting out of nowhere. She was reacting after a long series of moments that kept getting missed. The dog didn't change. The understanding did. And that's the part that catches people off guard. Because most of the time, there isn't one big moment. There are hundreds of small ones. The dog that starts hanging back. The dog that leaves the room. The dog that suddenly isn't interested in the thing they were enjoying 5 minutes ago. The dog that seems a little quieter than usual. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that feels important enough to stop everything and pay attention to. Until one day, something happens and you're left thinking, where did that come from? And that's usually the moment people start looking for answers because it feels random. It feels sudden. It feels like your dog was fine right up until they weren't. And that's where threshold comes in. Threshold is one of those words people hear all the time in dog training conversations. But I don't think most dog parents know what it actually means. Because when a dog goes over threshold, what they're capable of changes. The dog that would take food a minute ago won't. That dog that could respond to a cue a moment ago suddenly can't. The dog standing in front of you doesn't feel like the same dog anymore. And that's usually the moment that people start thinking the training has stopped working. But the training isn't what changed. Your dog's ability to access their learning is what changed. And most people don't know that. So they conclude that the training isn't working, or that their dog is stubborn, or that they're doing something wrong. And they try harder, and the dog gets more stressed, and the training keeps not working. I see this constantly. Dogs doing beautifully in one environment and struggling in another. And the person on the other end of the leash concluding that training isn't working when really the environment is the variable nobody is looking at. With Fitz, I learned this the hard way. Training in situations where he was already overwhelmed, wondering why nothing was sticking, why things that worked one day completely fell apart the next, why the dog I thought I knew seemed impossible to reach in certain situations. And what I eventually realized was that it wasn't about the training. It was about what the environment was asking of him. Because the environment was already asking more of him than he could comfortably handle. The work had to start somewhere quieter, somewhere he actually had room. And this is what makes it so hard to see when you're living it. Because the times your dogs can do the thing and the times they can't look like the same dog making completely different choices. And that feels inconsistent. And inconsistency sounds like a training problem. So you work on the training. But the dog isn't changing as much as it looks like they are. The environment is changing what they're able to do. And those are not the same problem, which means they don't have the same solution. Even when you start to understand that, even when you know what threshold means, you're still standing there with your dog ignoring the treats, ignoring the cues, reacting anyway. And knowing why it's happening doesn't automatically make it easier or fix the problem. You still walked into that situation hoping today would be different. You still hoped maybe this would click today. And when it doesn't, it's hard to not go home wondering how long this is going to take. And this is where I think a lot of people quietly get discouraged. Not because they don't understand the concept, but because understanding it and living it are two different things. You can know your dog needs a quieter environment and still feel the pull to try the harder place one more time. You can know they're overwhelmed and still hope maybe today will be different. You can know you're making the right decision and still feel disappointed when progress doesn't happen as quickly as you wanted it to. What shifted for me and for the clients I've worked with who got through this was understanding that the environment is the variable, not the dog, not the training, the environment. Because once you start there, everything else starts making more sense. Your dog isn't failing the training. They're in an environment where they can't access the part of their brain that learns. That's not a training problem. That is a threshold problem. And those have different solutions. Because here's what happens when you don't know this. You push into harder environments trying to build tolerance. You get failure after failure. And eventually, you start questioning everything: the dog, the training, yourself. And maybe you switch methods. Maybe you start over. Maybe you wonder if this is ever going to work. But you can change methods 100 times. And if the environment is beyond threshold, nothing will change. Because the method isn't the variable, the environment is. And the voice that says you should be further along by now doesn't magically disappear once you understand that. You can know exactly what's happening and still feel frustrated. Still wish things were easier. Still wish your dog could do all the things other dogs seem to be able to do. That's normal. The question to ask before every training session isn't, what am I working on today? It is my dog able to learn right now? Because if the answer is no, the work isn't the cue. The work is the environment. Here's the question I want to leave you with. What environment is your dog actually available to learn? And are you starting there? Because the dog who can do it in one situation and the dog who can't do it in another aren't two different dogs. They're the same dog navigating two different experiences. The dog didn't change. The understanding did. And that's a very different place to start. And if you're sitting there thinking, I want to get better at reading where my dog actually is before I start training, the Dog Body Language Secrets Quiz is exactly where I'd start. Because threshold starts with what you can see. The link is in the description. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, the reaction wasn't the first thing that happened. It was the first thing you understood.